This video is for entertainment purposes only, and it is my presentation on the 1980 New Mexico State Penitentiary riot. This presentation is for mature audiences only. It is very graphic. It bothered me for many years. I've researched this for at least 5 years. I heard about this. It was on a show or a website that the prison was one of the most haunted places in America. So, of course, I gotta go look and see what's going on. And I read the story of the riot, and it was horrifying. Yet I was so fascinated, I had to buy a book on it. And it is one of the craziest events I have ever heard of in my life. So if you have a weak stomach or are really sensitive, don't watch this video. Don't listen to me. So there are several places you could hear all about this. There's two documentaries you can find on YouTube. One is called Death in a Southwest Prison, and the other one is called Behind Bars, Riot in New Mexico. Almost all of this information I'm going to share with you is from notes. I'm old school and I actually take notes, and I even write in cursive. So that kind of says something about my age there. And I'm really trying not to be nervous. I get self-conscious a lot. Making these videos it's not easy, but it's very exciting at the same time. I could see how people get addicted to this stuff. I'm going to try to stay on track. It's a huge subject. I bet I could talk about this for like 5 hours. So I'm just going to read stuff from my notebook when I was researching what was going on. And let's see. There's the books you could buy: Politics of a Prison Riot, The Hate Factory, and The Devil's Butcher Shop. I read The Devil's Butcher Shop, and it took me years to get through it. In 2020, I don't know what got into me. I just decided to read the scariest books I could possibly find, and that was one of them. I finally finished it. I picked it up a few years ago when I heard about this and had to know everything about it. I think I got about 50 pages into it and I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to put it down. It was so horrifying. I also have The Hate Factory. I read that after The Devil's Butcher Shop, and I got about the same thing, maybe less than 50 pages into it, and I just could not stand it anymore. If you want the sick details about the smells and the sights, you can go ahead and read The Hate Factory. And I do not have Politics of a Prison Riot. Honestly, I don't think I want to read it. I've looked at a lot of things on this subject, and I think I'm kind of done. It changed me. It did. Hearing this story changed me. It terrified me. So I recommend watching this in the daytime. Again, watch this in the daytime. Put on your headphones. This is not for kids. It contains graphic content. Okay? And let's get started with our presentation. In 1885, the prison opened. The design was based on the same plans used for Sing Sing and Joliet. In 1916, 427 inmates in a space for 300. In 1948, there was a food riot, and in 1950. In 1952, the inmates killed an officer. In 1953, inmates seized the hospital and took 21 guards and staff hostage. A deputy warden shot and killed 2 riot leaders. And then the prison was torn down and a new one built in 1956. Let's back up to 1922. There was another riot against overcrowding, poor food, and excessive force. Inmates refused to return to their cells. 1 inmate was shot and killed. 5 were wounded. In the report, authorities were blamed for lack of experience and failure to understand how to control a prison population. In 1976, an inmate suffered heroin withdrawal. He was beaten by guards, kicked in the genitals severely. Over a year, he became sick and found to have an advanced malignant tumor on his testicles. The other inmates had pleaded for help for him, for their sick friend, and he died after being transferred to the state mental hospital after 2 weeks of suffering. And some of the prisoners wrote a letter to the governor. And then what do you think the government did about it? We're going to find out. Hang on just a moment. In November of 1979, the prisoners were served rotten turkey for Thanksgiving. The prison was overcrowded. There were mice, bugs, roaches everywhere. The prison was also segregated. They segregated all the races. They segregated also the homosexuals, and the child molesters and the mentally ill people were put in the same cell block. The picture you see in front of you is from the book, The Devil's Butcher Shop. I couldn't find a video online or a picture online about it, so I took a picture of it, and I hope it's not too sloppy. I am terrible at this stuff. Just trying to do the best I can. So, in April of 1979, back up a bit, a guard proposed an organized intelligence system to replace the prisoners on staff and informants. I anticipate serious incidents in the near future of corruption, contraband, escapes, riots, hostage taking, and killing. The letter dated July 6th, 1979, to the warden, Mr. Felix Rodriguez. The new riot control grills that closed South Wing dormitories from the main corridor were planned. So also the guards had a habit. They had a fun game. They would shut the lights off and try to start fights when everyone was in the mess hall. And they would be ready in their goon squad gear, ready to fight. So terrible living conditions. Terrible living conditions. After the rotten turkey and the blackouts, 4 inmates warned of a takeover to a prison psychologist around November 30th. One believed he was on the hit list. There were kites flying like wild. Deputy Warden Security Chief warned the governor, and he did nothing. Nothing. They didn't care. In December, men escaped with bed sheets and a stolen hacksaw. All but 1 were recaptured. 2 tower guards were fired. Can't let my screen go dark. All right. And now we're going to go ahead and get to the takeover. And again, this gets graphic. On Friday, February 1st, 1980, at 1:40 a.m., inmates stormed the door in E2 and captured 3 guards. Right before that happened, the inmates had been drinking prison wine. One inmate described how They all waited, and he could almost hear the beating hearts of all the inmates before the guard was going to open the door during count. The inmates stripped and tied up 4 guards. 1 inmate put on a guard uniform. 1 guard was seized and pushed into a day room. An older guard by sympathetic inmates, and they protected him. 1 guard was stripped and blindfolded. He was dragged down the hall with a belt around his neck. The inmates had their way and took turns with him. And you can get into details about that scene in The Hate Factory. At 1:57 a.m., the riot has announced itself. Inmates had taken officers' two-way radios and keys. Control guard hears over the radio, "We've got the shift commander hostage. There had better be a meeting with the governor and the media." Two guards were able to run out to Tower 1. At 2:02, rioters smashed windows to Control Center. At 2:05, the prison had been seized, all done in less than 25 minutes. 2 guards hid beneath cell block 5 near the gas chamber in a crawl space. 3 more guards were captured. Grill broken into. A medical technician was locked in the 2nd floor with the hospital with 7 inmates, and they protected him. At 2:15, hospital broken into. Guards are ordered to strip and are beaten. Inmates at this time got a hold of acetylene torches, and they had taken 12 hostages in total. The sex drug frenzy begins. Barbiturates, antidepressants, antipsychotics, sedatives, morphine, Valium, Demerol. The prisoners had raided all of the medications in the hospital, and they just started partying. In the documentaries, one described it as if you could get up, you were getting down, and everyone was getting loaded. The brothel opened up pretty much right away, and it was a sex and drug frenzy. This really happened. This is not a movie. I'm surprised this wasn't made into a movie. I think that'd be a really good movie. It's a horrible event, but let's keep on going. Oh my goodness. Men were lined up in the hall with bandanas made into tourniquets, injecting morphine, Valium, Demerol. The barber shop was broken into, and all of the scissors were looted. A tear gas launcher was fired into E2, and they barricaded themselves inside. And E2 was where the gay inmates were segregated. Sinks and urinals smashed. The killing began at 3 a.m. Snitches were beaten and stabbed to death. They pleaded for their life. "I'm no snitch." Inmates were burned to death in their cells. The killing ground was everywhere. In some of these cells, it took half an hour to burn through with the torches. Shovels, pipes, anything. Shanks, meat cleavers, anything people could get their hands on. They were using it as weapon. A mentally ill black man who was usually in his cell laying on the floor naked was standing in the middle of his cell, bewildered. He was beaten and dismembered. Electric drills, kitchen stirring paddles were also used. Rata carved on a victim's forehead and chest, and whisker-shaped gashes were carved into his face. And rata means rat. That's Spanish for rat. The killing took on the momentum of anybody you don't like. Sex was traded for protection. A Polaroid camera was found in an office, and pictures were taken. This evidence disappeared. The killing ends in cell block 4 at 8 a.m. 8 a.m. An inmate died of carbon monoxide poisoning from the smoke. Before this all happened, when inmates filed a complaint, they were threatened with solitary confinement. And then on the morning of Saturday, the main corridor was an inch or more deep with sewage and tap water. Inmates gave hostages in North Wing coffee, food, and cigarettes and protected them from assault. One inmate was a trained paramedic and cared for the wounded. He was later murdered after this. At 7:30 a.m., the National Guard arrived. The prisoners demanded to speak to media, or they would kill the hostages. A torch is used to cut through the door to the yard, and 20 inmates flee into the yard. Some are taken to hospitals or other jails. The media was allowed in, some interviewed with bandanas over their faces, and inmates began coming out of the escape holes. Rioters began screaming at the deflectors and cursing at them. They were like, "You get back in here!" And they were terrified. All kinds of little groups split off, and the death squad was just killing people everywhere. But it was mayhem. All the drugs you wanted, the sex you wanted, murder. Awful. Guards are now being released. The first burst into tears, and then the SWAT team enters the prison. After SWAT enters, they discover there have been rapes and stabbings, self-mutilation among yard refugees throughout the night and morning. The bodies were so burned, they mistook the white victims for black victims. The count was 39 dead, and it took a month to determine that. Anthropologists were brought in and collected 2 Sakar boxes full of bone shards. They found the worst and extensive mutilations were performed post-mortem. 35 people from the medical examiner's office worked around the clock. On March 8th, the governor announced the death toll at 33. They later found out some of the prisoners they had no record of. 19 were missing. 14 were not recorded. 9 months after the riot, the 12 hostages were given a 50 to 60% disability settlement. A psychologist described 3 of the men as vegetables. Each one was mutilated in some way. They are totally destroyed as human beings and will never work again. A National Guardsman said, when asked by the media what he did when he returned to the penitentiary, he said, "I vomited." Victims were determined to be unable to pay bribes and kickback to prison supervisors and staff. When this protection or shakedown money wasn't paid and they were labeled as snitches and moved to cell block 4, the medical examiner who discovered this was found dead while jogging. Later, they found hundreds of thousands of dollars was unaccounted for in the corrections budget. Nothing changed. The governor destroyed all of the evidence in the report. But every year, they still have their governor's ball gala. Oh, it's hard to listen to. Oh, it's hard to read. If you made it through that, I hope I did okay. I'm getting better at not slipping up. I think the secret is just try to read out loud and not let my screen time out and it go black. And so it goes even further into that. What I'm trying to tell all of you, the result of this was incompetent leaders and government. People in the government during this time, well, you heard me talk about the hundreds of thousands of dollars missing. They helped themselves to the meat that would be delivered to the prison. Some of the I don't remember. I didn't write it down. But some of the higher ups would back up their pickup trucks and just help themselves to the food. And I'm sure they starved people, did horrible things. So we have police brutality, poor food quality. They took away programs. They took away the work release program. They stuffed everybody in there. They segregated them. I've come to determine people are going to fight no matter what. You segregate them, you put them together, people are going to fight. And the people running the show are to be blamed for it. I mean, everybody, we all have a personal responsibility. But this was just negligence. And these people lost their lives. And history repeats itself. Let's look at Democratic Governor Bruce King. Moving on. There's your books. There's Mr. Bruce King. He was in the New Mexico House of Representatives, so I can't find too much stuff about him being in any Masonic group or fraternity. He's the governor. And these people are picked. All right, they're trained from child, to be leaders. In some parts of the book, it talks about there's always controversy with the New Mexico government at that time. There was talks of sexual misconduct, alcoholism, drug use, misappropriation of funds, on and on and on. So I just told you a terrible story about an event that just happened. And I like to go into, why did that happen? And then gets even kind of spookier. Jeffrey Epstein bought Bruce King's branch for $12 million, I think. There it is. And then, of course, Epstein accuser says she was told to have sex with the governor. That's a different governor. But my goodness. Just the corruption. It's gross. It's just terrible. And now you have heard that story. And I think they should teach this in schools. I really do. I mean, for, high school kids. You can't let stuff like this happen. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to me. This is the presentation I have been wanting to get out there for a long time. I'm going to have a part 2 of this. The mysteries get even spookier. But those are the events that happened. And there you go. You all have a great evening, day, morning. Have a good time. Bye.